As we all know, easy, affordable, public electric vehicle charging infrastructure is considered absolutely essential to help convince people who aren't bleeding-edge early adopters to make the switch to electric. Ask anyone who's unsure about going electric, and I'm betting worries about charging infrastructure will be high among their list of concerns. To try and tackle this, US President Joe Biden's original Build Back Better infrastructure bill, the one he ran for office promoting, proposed spending an ambitious $15 billion to expand electric vehicle charging access in the United States from about 100,000 connectors to 500,000. And to get more people plugging in and grow electric vehicles' market share, expanding the US connectors agnostic charging networks is critical. Rain's anxiety and concerns about charging access continue to be huge obstacles to EV adoption for many car buyers. And even among EV owners, crowding at charging stations is an issue that can impact travel plans and perhaps future purchasing decisions as well. Just last week, I spoke with someone who currently owns an electric vehicle and drives tens of thousands of miles per year, someone who said they may go back to gasoline because they're worried about dealing with charging queues while on time-critical business road trips. That expansion, by the way, isn't just limited to non-Tesla charging networks. While Tesla's charging network is far more comprehensive and reliable than the nearest non-Tesla network, it too is ploughing a lot of money into its own supercharger provisions. The difference, of course, is that Tesla funds, builds and operates its own network, while other automakers are relying on third-party providers, but that's for another video. The adage that making charging stations ubiquitous will drive EV adoption seems to be proven in many places around the world. Norway, for example, has such pervasive EV charging infrastructure that it's more of a surprise when you find a parking lot without a place to plug in. But as Bloomberg reported recently, that's not true everywhere. In Japan, where there are a large number of AC charge points and high-power rapid charging stations, and thus you'd expect a huge number of EVs, the majority of charging stations just sitting there, unloved and mostly unused. Although the country made significant financial investments in building out charging infrastructure starting in 2012, less than 1% of cars on the road in Japan today are electric. The US has more than double the market share in EVs for comparison, and the US is a long way from being a global leader. Now, Japan's government has plans to expand charging infrastructure further, but at the same time, many of those original charging stations, which have come to the end of their design lifespan without ever having really contributed to driving the adoption of EVs the way they're intended to, need replacing. That beacon of hope of an all-electric future, it's become a depressing essay on proving the build it and they will come mindset doesn't always work out. So the question is, what the heck happened? And what can we learn from Japan's example? To figure this out, let's look at some history. Things started out positively in Japan for electric vehicles, with the launch of the Mitsubishi i-MiEV and Nissan Leaf in 2009 and 2011 respectively. Both cars used the CHAdeMO charging protocol and could refuel quickly at CHAdeMO charging stations, a must given that many Japanese citizens don't have off-street parking or charging. Japan was on its way to being a leader in EV adoption. In fact, Japan led the world in electric vehicle ownership for a period of time. But the situation in Japan changed dramatically soon after the introduction of the Nissan Leaf, when a massive earthquake and tsunami struck the island nation on March 11, 2011. The natural disaster led to an industrial one, when the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station experienced a power failure and eventual partial meltdown. Public sentiment in a country with more reason than most to look askance at nuclear technology quickly turned against its nuclear power supply, leading to all of the nuclear power stations in Japan to be shuttered, as the country moved to cover the resulting loss of generating capacity, mostly with atmosphere-polluting coal power and some other fossil-fueled generation methods that were anything but clean or green. And while it is, in fact, still better for the environment to run an electric car using coal-generated power than to run an internal combustion engine car burning petrol or diesel, it isn't as easy a sell as running an electric car off a power source that doesn't put any pollutants into the atmosphere in normal operation. It was a big hit to Japan's excitement over EVs. Not to mention that those who found themselves without power for months after the earthquake with no viable way to recharge since many roads were impassable served as stark examples of EV limitations. But that was far from the only factor at play. While the earthquake and tsunami further pushed electric vehicle designers and the people behind the CHAdeMO charging standard to build robust vehicle-to-home capabilities into cars, it also exposed that there were challenges for electric vehicles during a crisis, challenges that were acutely felt by owners of the relatively short-legged EVs of the time. These challenges were among the factors that led engineers to shift much of their attention to hydrogen fuel cell technology, with its far swifter filling process and lower reliance on grid-tied distribution systems. By the mid-2010s, the Japanese auto industry was focusing hard on hydrogen, spurred on by massive investment and buy-in from the Japanese government, as well as continuing its commitment to the hybrid drivetrains pioneered by companies like Toyota and Honda. For example, former President Shinzo Abe tasked his government back in 2017 to come up with a plan for a full hydrogen society by the end of that year. Tokyo 2020 was meant to be a celebration of hydrogen fuel cell technology. These companies also had a huge amount of money invested in hybrid systems and wanted to see a continuing return on that investment. And so, many Japanese automakers started promoting both hybrid and hydrogen fuel cell technology as being more robust and reliable than EVs. Japanese EV adoption was further hampered by leadership decisions and leadership changes. Akio Toyoda, the president of the company that shares his name, is a devoted petrolhead and avid racing enthusiast who's been a vocal EV skeptic for years, criticizing everything from EV performance to the social and economic impact of EV adoption. Mr. Toyoda is also the president of the Japanese Automotive Manufacturers Association. Over at Nissan and Mitsubishi, which led the way with their Leaf, EN-V200 and various iMIEV models, the departure of disgraced CEO Carlos Ghosn, who had been a champion of electric mobility, likely played a role in delaying the expansion of electric vehicles, though it's hard to know for sure. Mitsubishi's Outlander plug-in hybrid, as far as I can tell, is the only electrified vehicle the company offers since the end of iMIEV production in 2020. And while Nissan significantly upgraded its Leaf sedan in 2018, until the Ariya luxury SUV launches later this year or early next, the Leaf and EN-V200 are the only choices from the brand 10 years after it blazed the way with the Leaf. Meanwhile, Nissan's marketing has chosen to emphasize its mild hybrid quote-unquote e-power vehicles, which offer electric-like operation at low speed and are less to buy than the larger, more cumbersome Leaf. Over the years, Honda has had a wider range of plug-in options, though not by much. There was an EV variant of the Honda Fit/Honda Jazz for a while. The Honda Clarity was available as a plug-in hybrid, hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, or a battery electric vehicle. And of course, in Europe and Japan, Honda now offers the delightful, if expensive, Honda e-City car. But compared to European and Chinese automakers, the Japanese market has been light on electric cars, and even lighter on what we'd consider really good cars, for the entire time those neglected charge points we were talking about earlier have been in existence. In 2011, in Japan, you could buy a Nissan Leaf or Mitsubishi iMIEV if you want a battery electric car. 9 years later, in 2020, you could buy those same two cars, plus the Honda E, BMW i3, and of course Tesla vehicles, though while Tesla has offerings in Japan, until 2021 and price cuts due to cars coming in from Giga Shanghai, sales were beyond terrible. If you compare that to the explosion of choices in Europe or China, for instance, over that same time period, you can see that the Japanese market stagnated badly. Now, however, things are starting to change. True mass deployment of hydrogen, particularly what's termed green hydrogen, made from renewable resources, continues to be a more challenging problem than many auto industry people expected. Japan has drastically failed to reach its goal of 40,000 hydrogen fuel cell vehicles on the road by 2020, and while the national government and its auto industry remain committed to hydrogen as a big part of the country's power and transportation infrastructure, betting on HFCVs and against BEVs has put Japan's powerful and economically vital auto industry behind in what has become a rapidly growing electrified transportation landscape. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, at a time when Japanese imports to my home country of the USA were absolutely spanking the pants off domestic and European cars. Japanese cars were better built, far more efficient and reliable, and aggressively priced. But in a world where electric cars are ascendant, for what they currently make up a small market share, a lack of electric options risks turning Japanese cars into the same sort of dinosaurs that they so resoundingly trounced in my youth. And while today many people say Americans wouldn't ever accept a Chinese car in their driveway, I remember when the same was said about Japanese cars and Korean cars after that. All of which brings us back to those sad and neglected charge points. They stand as proof that charging infrastructure isn't enough to drive EV adoption. Good charging is meaningless without good cars to charge. And that requires automakers to buy into electric vehicles. And there are serious criticisms that should be heeded about the somewhat willy-nilly way those charge points were built, with less attention to where and how people actually drive than to where charging was easy and cheap to build out. But I also think they say something significant about the conflict between battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. There were tens of thousands of charge points in Japan when the country pivoted hard towards hydrogen, But even now, with everyone from auto industry leaders to prime ministers having promoted hydrogen as the way forward, there are fewer than 150 hydrogen fueling stations in Japan. As a side note, by the way, nearly all of Japan's shuttered nuclear power stations have been upgraded and could be spun back up with relatively little technical difficulty, which would allow the country to once again stop using the greenhouse gas producing coal plants, not to mention potentially provide a carbon-free way to produce hydrogen. Politically and culturally, however, it doesn't seem like there's the will to make it happen right now. In the only country ever to experience firsthand the horrific reality of nuclear weapons, not to mention the far more recent physical and psychological trauma of the Fukushima disaster, I suppose that's understandable. For what it's worth, I hope Japan can make hydrogen fuel cell vehicles work, as I think there are real limitations to both hydrogen fuel cell and battery electric technology, and a mix of the two technologies on the road could be a better way forward, if we can ever crack the challenge of producing cheap zero-emission hydrogen. But I'm also hopeful that Japan's world-leading automakers may at last be getting in gear on producing good battery electric cars. If they can, maybe the next generation of Japanese charge points won't have to be so lonely after all. That's it for today. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and our other two channels, Transport Evolved Take 2 and Transport Evolved Shorts. We know that while a fair few of you already are subscribed, many more aren't, so go on, hit the bell and help us out. Let us know below what you thought of this video, and if you're not someone who likes the YouTube's comment section, which is understandable, then why not continue this over on our Discord server? It's free, and we'll leave a link below. Thanks on behalf of the entire T crew go out to the folks on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month patrons. Special thanks to our $50 a month patrons, David Genacula, Andrew Martin, Guido Drahota, Brofy Wolf, Taz on the Gong, Paul Conway, Sean Ueda, Gordon C., Regine Fellows, Anonymous Freak, Jim Burness, Kyle Hodson, Anthony Coates, Laura Sanborn, Rory Litwin, and Denny Hyde. And our deepest gratitude to $100 a month Patreon supporters, John Lyons, Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, JP Fagerback, Will Graylan, Ellery Hensey, and Ian. If you'd like to join the ranks of our wonderful supporters, you'll find links below to Patreon, Bitcoin, and Ko-fi, and of course, you can also buy your very own Transport Evolved swag over on our Redbubble store. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving!